Hi, I'm Wendy Shearer. I'm Director of Partners and Ecosystems for Pulsant, and I'm delighted to be hosting this new series of podcasts on data sovereignty. We're joined today by our first guest, Assad Noori from KPMG. Assad, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Wendy. Lovely to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Before we jump in to talk about data sovereignty, I'd really like to just talk a little bit more about your career personally, because you've worked for some of the big industry heavyweights like Atos and you're obviously in Digital Realty. So could you just maybe share a little bit more about your journey so far in the digital infrastructure space?
Yeah, happy to. So after my degree in economics, I moved into accountancy. I started with my SEMA management accounting and soon realised that wasn't for me and segued straight into IT and technology. I started off at KCOM, moved to Dimension Data, which then became NTT. Then Atos. I spent 6-7 years at Atos, where I finished off as COO for UK in infrastructure. Then joined Digital Realty as the UK MD and had the privilege of leading 15 data center assets across London and the Southeast. So I'm now at KPMG where I lead the UK's digital infrastructure advisory team.
Amazing. Lots of stories, I'm sure, that go right behind that. So let's jump into data sovereignty. Clearly a huge topic in the marketplace, but for people who maybe aren't too familiar with it, how do you define it and what's the context currently in the UK marketplace?
Yeah, it's a great question, and certainly a definition that has been misunderstood and hard to define. There's no universal definition for what data sovereignty, or in fact digital sovereignty is what it's more commonly being referred to as is. But certainly at KPMG, we refer to it as that autonomy, that strategic autonomy over the data, the applications and the infrastructure that data resides within the geography that it resides in, according to the local laws and customs of that country.
Got it. And why is that particularly important in the UK right now?
I think because that definition is changing, proliferating as much as it has been, particularly with the dawn of AI, it's really challenging how data is handled, how it's used and leveraged, and where it's actually stored. Data can reside in different public cloud environments, and we can break into that a bit more later in the conversation. But when you query that data, it's crossing borders, it's crossing jurisdictions, it's crossing different infrastructure providers as well. So I think from a UK perspective, maintaining that compliance from a regulatory perspective, but also that underpinning that the ownership of that data and the IP that it carries and holds to that nation, I think is really important. And we'll see that definition extend and expand as we go forward for sure. So there are different perspectives when it comes to data and digital sovereignty. There's the legal side of it, which refers to the laws of the land. There is the digital component of it, which looks at the infrastructure tech stack, which some companies and countries want to maintain. Then there are also the sort of local perspectives as well. Take the Maori culture, who have right to maintain their data in a certain way. So I think depending on what side or what lens you look at digital infrastructure and digital sovereignty will determine your posture towards that data, how it's handled and how it needs to be controlled.
That's so complex, isn't it?
Very.
There's a lot to consider.
Yeah, indeed.
Amazing. So actually you made a really good point there, Assad, because you said digital sovereignty and data sovereignty. So can we just expand on that a bit more? Do you see them as two separate things, or actually is it just interchanging the words?
I think it's an evolution of the baseline of data sovereignty to digital sovereignty, because it really brings in the role that AI is having on data in itself. Historically, it was purely around the data sets, what those data sets had, people's names, addresses, banking details, all very important. But what AI has done, and there are some points of view which think this could be a Trojan horse, it's what the AI can do to the data. It's how it takes that data, interprets it, and extrapolates. And I think calling it digital sovereignty allows you to include the impact of AI, the data itself, clearly, the infrastructure that it sits on, including the assets, the buildings, the fiber, but also the various cloud service providers where this data might reside. So I think that's the nuanced definition, including incorporating the broader church of digital assets that allow you to define the rules and policy around how that data is ultimately handled.
God, it moves so fast, doesn't it? All the definitions are constantly evolving, and then it's like you've got data sovereignty and then how it intertwines with AI, and nothing really exists in isolation, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think, September last year, when the UK finally classified data centers as critical national infrastructure, we saw the pivot. We saw the convergence of customers, technology, and regulation, and they're all moving at different paces. Customer demand and insatiable demand for their applications, enterprises growing internationally, and regulation trying to keep up with not only the nascent demand of this industry, but also ensuring that we're protected from cyber incidents and various other malware and threat actors. So I think you're right. It has moved very quickly, and this convergence that we're seeing across those three different stakeholders is one where the balance has to be struck very carefully but promptly.
And I know, so you're kind of similar to me. You're super passionate about supporting growth right across the UK and the kind of growth of UK PLC, if you like. So where do you see data sovereignty coming into that? How is that underpinning the growth in UK PLC right now?
It's another great question. Absolutely UK PLC, but UK as a nation, the social benefits of digital infrastructure and what it has done to enable citizens, enterprises, business as a whole. That competitive agility is why data sovereignty and digital sovereignty has to be at the forefront of policy, and it's organizations like KPMG and like Pulsant who enable that particular transformation. I think we spend a lot of time creating content, creating IP. What is our differentiation? Service providing. And I think for us to protect that IP is going to be incredibly important to our competitive advantage in the UK and global stage.
And do you think that we have in the UK an advantage in that space as such? So the way that is this one of those moments in time where how different countries respond to the data sovereignty problem will define how successful their growth will be? Is that how we see it?
Yes and no. And I think if you sort of reflect on one of your earlier questions around that convergence of infrastructure, policy, regulation, and customer, I think in the UK as an investment location, we still rank at top 3 or 4. You can fact check me on that as well. For foreign direct investment, people want to be in the UK. We innovate in the UK. We are the intention is to grow through our digital advantage. I think having an environment that is conducive to that is really important. But underpinning that is a set of digital infrastructure assets which allow us to drive innovation and also protect that IP and the content that we create for the benefit of the UK and society as a whole.
So Assad, we actually just recently launched a report which showed that data sovereignty was second behind AI reason for people reassessing their data strategies. I'm interested to hear, is it kind of growing in conversation with your clients? Are you having more engaged discussions about data sovereignty with a lot of the KPMG clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at AI, data sovereignty, digital sovereignty, and also in the environment, those are certainly the 3 top talkers when it comes to conversations. What this policy topic does, cut across is also the technology and data landscape as well. Customers have moved from their on-prem environments to a public cloud environment, and they're now exploring hybrid clouds and a sort of a mixed model in the world of hybrid, less centralized and more distributed. With that comes its complexity. And I think clients, certainly from our perspective, need some support. They need help in navigating what is becoming an increasingly more complicated environment to manage their business and their workloads. So I think sovereignty, digital sovereignty is absolutely a topic, because what we are trying to do is enable customers to invest in the right type of cloud strategy. Where do you want to put your applications? What applications have commercial risk and commercial sensitivity, which needs to be protected, onshore. But equally, we're so dependent on international public cloud service providers. There's CSPs not based in the UK, and there is a perspective and a growing view that dependency on international CSPs, which they are, could impact our ability to stay competitive and innovative. So clients are absolutely coming to us to help them and to define their cloud journey, their cloud value case, but also how to leverage the cloud in a secure way through sovereign clouds to protect that data and IP. And
you're obviously so well placed to advise on that. I mean, I think it just adds to the complexity, because what we are seeing is, as you say, people considering what is the right place for that particular workload. So they're not all in on public cloud or all in on on-prem. It's in this sort of hybrid world. And then they look at the cost and the implications of moving those workloads around from a data perspective. But then every platform that they decide where they're going to put it, they then have to think about the data sovereignty implications on top of that. So it's just sort of adding more layers of consideration for clients, right?
Definitely. And this is where the jurisdiction element of digital sovereignty comes into play. You will have data residing in a public cloud in one city or one country and another data set sitting in another one. When you are querying that data set, you are effectively or potentially going to be receiving responses to that query from multiple locations. That in itself is complicated. Mm-hmm. So there is a view that, query level data requests are going to be important in this to maintain that sovereignty. But it's certainly not a question that has been resolved as yet.
So sticking with the theme of customers, are there particular sectors or industries that you're seeing where data sovereignty is particularly important?
Yeah, without a doubt, and I'll come on to that. But if we sort of reflect on, post-Brexit, when we had GDPR, how that became UK GDPR, and then it evolved with the UK Data Protection Act of 2018, we saw the controls and the regulatory environment for all organisations to operate in a more certain, more confident way. I think it's obvious to say, in answering to your question, areas of national security, sovereignty is key. Working with government, absolutely, sovereignty is key, and certainly financial services institutions where you have your financial matters, your pensions, your bank accounts, all of that needs to be protected as well. But I think also in life sciences and healthcare, there have been some fairly high-profile breaches of data over the years. The NHS, for example, is one. We have to do a lot more to protect that, and I think that's where working with the likes of a KPMG or a Pulsant when it comes to this particular topic allows you to navigate the risks, the potential risks, but also more importantly, the mitigation and how data needs to be segmented and partitioned and protected within that broad ecosystem of digital infrastructures.
And do you find then when people are coming to you, they appreciate the depth of the problem that they're facing, or do they just think, I've been given a data sovereignty problem to solve, like where do I start? Like how do they know where to start?
Well, you have to take a risk-based approach to everything when it comes to this topic as well. And I think, as a firm, we want to make a difference to our clients. So we will always look to understand their business, what their objectives are, and ensure they are enabled to do that and be successful, but within the bounds of the ever-changing regulatory policy and headwinds that come with this. It's a dynamic environment. It's not a linear journey to full data sovereignty. And what we're also seeing now is the emergence of these neo-clouds. I think it was 150, 160 plus neo-clouds already exist in the UK, all offering a slightly different digital sovereignty and AI compute service to address these ever-changing headwinds that we are facing as an industry and country.
And do you find that the people who are thinking about the sovereignty element, are they coming from the traditional sort of IT side of an organisation? Are they coming from a compliance side? Are they coming from a CIO sort of perspective? Where does that normally begin?
I think similar to the previous question, this is convergence, at an organizational level. Long gone are the days where IT or business throws a request over the fence and IT have to muddle through trying to work out what exactly that means. We have to work hand in glove, and that's what we do. We bring together the technologists, we bring together the legal, we bring together the policy, and together we can ideate and work with customers, advising them on a strategy that enables them to deliver on their customer and shareholder value expectations, but also within the policy, guardrails that exist for our nation and our safety.
Yeah, it's a really good point, isn't it? Because it shows you how, as you say, nothing exists in isolation. This sort of pollinates across all different aspects of organisations.
Yeah, indeed.
So that's a really good point, Assad. You touched on neo-clouds there, which is another word that seems to be becoming in everyone's vocabulary recently. Do you want to just expand a little bit on that as a concept?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got our public cloud on one side, the big hyperscalers who provide public cloud services for enterprises. We've got our scale data centers that we know, the high performance scale-up facilities. We've got co-location facilities as well, retail co-location and wholesale co-location for enterprise clients looking to manage their workloads in a shared environment. What we also have now are these neo clouds, and these are focused predominantly on high performance compute, the GPU cluster services that require infrastructure to cool them, contiguous space to grow. And we're building these things up to sort of 200, 250 kilowatts at a time. They are specifically focused towards providing the AI compute services for clients and enterprises who are looking to explore AI, whether it's for agentic AI or broader high performance computing workloads.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time, isn't it? I mean, it's having a huge impact, obviously, as you say, on the digital infrastructure providers and also on the service provider landscape. I feel like everyone's repositioning where they sit and what the impact of the neo cloud providers is going to be as part of that landscape.
Yeah, agreed. And I think where we are now with large language models and all the machine learning that's going on for the next 2 to 3 years, arguably, we're still going to be training these models to be more useful and more effective. And as we pivot from learning to inference, how do we now take all that learning and apply it to real business value use cases with minimal error? That's where we're going to see the emergence of the neocloud providers be more effective, providing that insight at the edge, closer to the user. The last thing we want is high latency environments. Yeah. We want low latency to take that inferred information and put it to good use when requested. That's the value of these edge neoclouds that are suddenly presenting themselves here.
Music to my ears, Assad, given on the basis that we are 14 regionally dispersed data centres. It's actually a market that we've seen coming, but a lot of this is about the timing, right? And it's what we're seeing is the people who are starting to build out some of those solutions. As you say, the large language models might be located in one particular area with one sort of design architecture, whereas when you move into the inference, then you're thinking about how you do that in a distributed model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that third point I mentioned earlier on around ESG and the environment, using sustainable energy to power some of these high-performing environments is absolutely critical. So places like the Nordics or the north of England, or places where the environment is prevalent to wind, to solar, to hydro, these are all alternative energy, renewable sources that will power that. I think the exam question comes when we move from learning to inference, and how best we can continue to deliver environmentally safe and responsible services to our end users.
Completely agree. Okay, so this is clearly a very complex topic, and we've navigated from data sovereignty, digital sovereignty, and talked about neoclouds and all the different platforms in between. I guess what underpins all of that is data. I'm interested to explore what happens. What's the cost of doing nothing? What if people don't address digital sovereignty and the underpinning data? What could possibly go wrong?
Indeed, it won't happen to us, right? Excuse me. So if you just sort of reflect on that definition of what data and digital sovereignty is that strategic autonomy of your data, your applications, your infrastructure, in the context of your business and the jurisdiction that you're in as well. That's the prize, that control, that authority over your information and how it's used. The consequences are well documented, and you only have to reflect on the headlines over the last year. A large automotive company in the UK was in the news. It stopped their production line for months, at huge financial consequence. The NHS with the data breach and data loss. These are the types of things that we have to get our arms around very quickly. We can't put our head in the sand. We can't have a cavalier approach to saying, we've out-tasked or outsourced our data to a third party. It'll be fine. No, it won't be. Organizations have to embed this rigor into their culture when it comes to handling their data and how they manage that data and who gets access to it, where and when and at what time. That authority, that perspective has to be the focus of all enterprises and government for the UK at least.
I loved what you said there, that rigor. That makes so much sense, doesn't it? Because actually this isn't really about data sovereignty in isolation or even cyber in isolation. This is about data strategies. And we used to people talked about what's your technology strategy, but actually it's so important now because data underpins everything that we're doing to have a specific strategy focused on data, and that needs to incorporate everything, the platforms it sits on, the performance they get from it, the cyber that they're wrapping around it, the placement of that data, the rules and regulations. It just, it's huge.
It's huge, and it's there's no simple way to overcome this. As I said, that convergence of those three elements of technology, customer, and policy have to work together and work at pace and at scale to ensure that they dealing with the problems here and now, but also protecting society, business, and the nation from compromise or international threat actors. So you're absolutely right in that sort of conclusion.
So Assad, I knew this was going to be a great conversation, and I feel like we've gone all the way out, and I want to try and just pull it back in again. Clearly, this is complicated. It's not one single thing that people can just go and do. It is a multifaceted approach. But if for any of the viewers or listeners who haven't yet started their journey into digital or data sovereignty, what's your top tip? And also keen to understand, where do you think this is going to go in 2026?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's here to stay. So digital sovereignty and data sovereignty is getting ever more complicated. AI is certainly creating headaches, but also lots of opportunity if you get it right. I think it's important that people out there and clients out there recognize that they're not alone on this endeavor. As I said, the convergence of technology, customers, and regulation are going to catalyze the importance of this subject. So ask questions. If you're unsure, consult. There are organizations out there who specialize in this particular topic. Taking that risk-based approach is really important too. The consequences of not getting your data sovereignty exam question correct is material. It's significant. There's a commercial risk. There is legal risk. There is reputational risk, and reputations can be lost in short order. So I think as we look forward, take that data sovereignty topic really seriously. Work across your business and work with those in the industry who can help you navigate what is a challenging environment, but one where if it's done correctly, there's benefit to be gained for sure.
Amazing. Listen, Assad, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us today. It's been an absolutely fabulous conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us as well. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.